Hey, welcome to another episode of the Coffee Break Podcast, where our mission is to share business ideas, practices, and strategies while we enjoy our cup of coffee. And today we are really excited about a conversation. Get ready for some notes and some very eye-opening conversations. We've got Eileen Stephens in the studio today, and she's with the Culture Index. Very eye-opening about the different types of traits in your organization, the people that carry those traits, how they apply as a team. We're going to start out with this. There's going to be a two-part series, and you'll find out why as we get into it, because it is a very lengthy, in-depth conversation. This isn't something that you can capture in a few minutes, but the first part of this conversation, we're going to break down what the important factors are, and then we're going to break down some of the traits that I have and some of the traits that my partner Chris has as well, and we're going to see how they play together, how they conflict with each other, how they work together. And then in part two of this conversation, which will be next week, we're going to be talking about how our leadership team follows into these traits as well. So just make sure you stick around for both parts 1 and 2. Grab a notepad, get ready. This is going to be a powerful conversation right after this.
We got so much to say. We got a podcast to make. We're sipping on lattes, and it's time for a coffee break. Time for a coffee break. Oh, yeah.
All right, Eileen, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
We're excited. We have lots of paper on the desk here, and we're going to dive into all that. But before we do have to handle rapid fire. 5 randomly selected questions just to get under your skin. Now we've been
nervous.
Yeah,
go ahead.
We've been talking about this a little bit leading up to this. You and I's. What would you refer to this as? The
traits or how somebody's wired.
Okay. So our traits are very similar. So since you are very similar to me, then I know that you don't like this, which is really fun because I get to have the questions and you don't. All right, here we go. 5 randomly selected questions.
I need to win.
Yes, you need to win with unknown point values, which is even more fun just to get under your skin. Okay. Number 1, if you wrote a book, what would it be called?
It would either be something like Play to Your Strengths or Stop Making Stupid Human Decisions.
Okay, this is the greatest title ever. Stop Making Stupid Human Decisions. I love that. All right, number 2, what life lesson did you learn the hard way?
Ooh, think before I speak. Watch the opinionated nature.
All right.
So when I got married, I always said I would never date anybody that I worked with, so I married him. And
just jumped right into it.
Just jumped right in. So first leadership meeting after we got married. Now I'm the youngest of 9, so I started working as a maid in a motel at 14.
Yeah.
So our first management meeting afterwards was at a golf course, and one of the VPs, I'm all of 25, looks out on the golf course and says, "You notice this time of day the only people playing golf are women?" I haven't played golf, so I look out there and see like 2 women and 6 men. Before I could stop, my opinionated self said, "Well, Jim, if you paid my husband more, I'd stay home and play golf all the time too." Yeah, that did not go over well. Came up in my review.
Yeah.
And I learned, you know what? I could say something to push back without being a jerk about it.
Yeah, that was very direct, actually. But yeah, I could. All right. Number 3, what makes you smile?
Having fun, being around my kids, making a difference, seeing other people grow. I love working with organizations and finding that diamond in a rough.
Yeah.
And watching them blossom. That is a high like no other.
Very cool. All right. I like it. Number 4, what is the most desirable trait that another person can possess?
Integrity.
All right.
For me.
Very intriguing. All right. And then last, number 5, do you ever celebrate green lights?
As in get to drive faster?
Yeah.
Yes. Let's go. We got a lot to do, and I need it done very quickly.
Well, it's an interesting question. I love this one is when it comes up in my list because we always complain, or many of us complain when we run into a red light. It's delayed us. It's been a frustration. But when we get a green light, we just take it for granted. We just keep on trucking. We never go like, man, I got a green light.
I think that's true because humans are making machines. We make meaning out of behavior all the time.
Yeah.
Problem is we make a lot of assumptions about why somebody's doing something rather than understanding the why.
Yeah.
And it is easier to be frustrated and focus on that than it is to celebrate, which is something we all have to work on continuously.
Very true. All right. Congratulations. You passed. It is a
Yay.
score of 817.
Yes.
So congratulations.
What's the top score?
I have no idea. I think that I don't even know that because I make them up all the time, but I think one of the higher scores was somewhere in 1,000.
So I didn't win. I came in second. I don't like coming in second. Chad?
I can't say that I didn't do that on purpose. All right. So we're going to jump into the conversation. You were recommended to be a guest on the podcast by Kurt Graves, who's a mutual friend of ours. And he sent me an email and said, hey, it was a lot of words on it too, by the way, which we'll talk about later. But said, hey, let's connect you guys up because I think that you would have some common interest and produce a really good conversation. So I'm excited to jump into it because I've never had Kurt recommend anybody that has not been perfect. So he does a really good job. The company is Culture Index. What does that mean? Why is it relevant?
So Culture Index was founded by Gary Wallstrom and C. Spruning. It's located in Kansas City. So I am a licensee, which is kind of like a franchise owner. Mm-hmm. What we do is we help business owners and executives increase their top and bottom line and create sustainable scalability. And the way that we do that is using data for humans. It's putting people in the right seats and giving them the tools to be successful.
Gotcha. So putting people in the right seats, that comes a lot from the book Traction from Gino Wickman, where when you read that book, that's all that it kind of talks about and refers to is you can have the right people in the right seats on the bus so that you can get the best traction for your organization. And that is really a priority.
Yes, because everybody wants to spend the majority of their time playing to their strengths. Who wants to go to work every day and have an out-of-body experience? Mm-hmm. It's not fun for anybody.
No.
So I'm 4'11" and change, we'll call it 5, we'll just add up. I might want to be the best basketball player of all time. Mm-hmm. I can work out 15, 16, 17 hours a day. Chances of me doing that are very slim.
Yeah.
So it's about finding out what you're good at and all in. Sure, we need to put tools in our tool belt, but if we spend the majority of time trying to improve our weaknesses, we're not really taking advantage of who we are, and we're not having any fun.
Yeah. I've had a lot of conversations with people, and it typically either goes one of two ways. One is you've got to improve your weaknesses or to play to your strengths. Like that's really, it's a split conversation amongst experts
Yes.
of which way you lean. And I can say from kind of the experience that I've gone through is having more focusing more on what you're good at, so playing to your strengths and building people around you that support you in your weaknesses is much more enjoyable than just constantly working on your weaknesses.
Exactly. That's called being smart, right? That's called use your strengths and surround yourself with people that fill in what you're not good at.
So what got you interested in this type of work?
I think just having made all those decisions, interviewing somebody, thought they were going to be a rock star, brought them in, didn't work out. Of course, the first thing is, what did I not teach them? What did I not train them on? Then at some point, it's like, man, this just isn't a good fit. And nobody really likes to fire anybody.
Yes.
So how do you stop from doing that is we have to get ourselves out of our own way. We all have our certain perceptions. We tend to hire people like ourselves, but a little less than, which is great if you want them to do what you're good at. But if you're trying to surround yourself with others, you have to get out of your own way. Yeah. And the only way to do that is true empirical data.
Well, it's funny because I've shared this story multiple times before, but I remember a conversation with that Chris and I had many, many years ago, and about the fact that, man, if we're just so awesome as individuals that if we could just hire and duplicate ourselves, then it would be amazing. And that is one of the stories that I like to share is the worst thing that you can do as a leader is to hire a bunch of people like yourself because your organization is doomed for failure, right? So finding and I kind of was made aware of that process through reading and learning and kind of educating myself on that because that was just a natural thing is I'm great at everything, so why shouldn't we just have more people like that? And then come to find out I'm not actually great at everything. So it's a very egotistical way to think, but a learning experience nonetheless. So understanding that and you know, one of the things that intrigues me a lot about this type of stuff is it is data. I love, kind of diving into charts and graphs and understanding how this information is relevant. So now that you have this information, how do you utilize it? Because on this podcast, many episodes ago, we've talked to folks that are big on personality assessments, either Myers-Briggs or maybe it's the Enneagram or whatever. And how you apply that into your organization. How does this play into something like that? How does it complement it? How does that all work together?
That's an excellent question, because what we really do, this is applied behavioral analytics in the broadest sense. And you're right. If I give somebody built like yourself a 50-page report on 5 applicants, you are not going to read it. Mm-hmm. And you're going to skim through it, pick out a couple of pieces. That doesn't really help you grow your organization and grow your people, which as a leader, that's really what your job is. So what we do is teach executives on how to take this information, understand what it means on a very deep level, and how to properly apply it. The validity is 0.92. So in 10 years, I've have yet for it to be wrong. I've probably read back, 50,000 surveys at this point. I've had 6 people tell me it wasn't them. All 6 times everybody in the room turned around, looked at them and said, yes, it is.
You're just not very self-aware.
Exactly. So trust the data. Yeah. Now, it's 7 critical work-related traits, but it's not everything.
I want to interrupt you. On those 6 people that said that it was not them, did they all share the same type of traits?
5 of them did. They're what we call a debater. And that's what they do. They debate.
That's great. Okay. So it's interesting. I'm a big fan of this type of stuff because we did multiple times, and as part of our hiring process, we do a Myers-Briggs test, and it doesn't determine if they're going to be a part of the team or not, but it just lets us know out of the gate, up front, how they kind of communicate. But more recently, within the last year, we had our leadership team, which is the group of people that also went through this culture index test with you, went back through the Myers-Briggs and went through it in more of a fine-tooth comb, because historically, and this is one of the things that I've failed with, is we do that assessment and then just retain the information and never really share why it's relevant or what it means for that individual. So I've got all the information and I look at it and I can understand from a perspective why this person and this person get on each other's nerves, but they have no idea. So as a leadership team, we all went back through this process, and then everybody basically shared what their personality type was and what they thought about it. And it just opened up this whole new conversation about, okay, now I know why you get on my nerves. Now I know why, we can't get along on this area. Now I know why we struggle for communication here. So it changed the way that everybody communicated. So I'm thinking, well, how do we take something very basic like that and then put it on steroids?
It's funny you say that, because that's what was going through my head is culture index is like taking that and put it on steroids. So the field of applied behavioral psychology really started out in the 1920s. William Moulton Marston, Harvard psychologist, wrote a book called Emotions of Normal People. And, what do you do with that? It's all psychology based. Same guy, he and his wife came up with Wonder Woman. So pretty eclectic guy.
Gotcha.
1940s, the military said, interesting traits of people. How do we measure them? They were trying to figure out which pilots were going to be successful. Mm-hmm. So the field went from psychology to psychometrics. Out of that, then a lot of people came along the way. And then culture index got the validity to 0.92. It actually took 5.5 years and over 7 figures to develop this. Takes less than 10 minutes to take the survey, but what comes out of it is pretty remarkable.
All right. So later on, if I can remember to come back to it, because I'm sure we'll bounce around from thing to thing, but I do want to hear some other companies that have had success with this and what it has meant for their organizations. You've got a lot of data in front of you. So in preparation for this, you sent me an email and said, hey, can you get whoever on your team to fill this out so that we have some information to discuss? And I didn't see the email, forgot about it, didn't send it out. So then you kindly sent me a text message and said, hey, check your email. I sent you an email to send out to everybody. And so they got it done. And I can tell you, when I went through the process, I was joking. I actually mentioned it in our leadership team this morning. I said, everybody take that. Did everybody take the survey? And they're like, yeah, we did it. And I said, did anybody else have to have a second browser open to use the dictionary?
Google the words, yeah.
So that was fun. That was an exciting part of it. So
yeah, unless you majored in English, nobody knows the meaning of all those words. It's okay.
Yeah, so they need to adjust it and just put a definition beside each one of them. But anyways, so that was fun. So tell us kind of the concept of what it is, and then we can start to dive into some of the results.
Okay, so from the highest level, it's getting the right people in the right seats based on who they are, not what they know. We typically hire people for what they know based off their resume, which they wrote or spent $250 and somebody wrote it for them.
Sure.
But we typically dishire them because of who they are. Mm-hmm. What's the piece of that puzzle that you can't change?
Yeah, who they are.
What they know or who they are. Exactly. So we want to start with the right traits, and then what do they know? Where do we need to fill in the knowledge gaps? But we have to start with the right traits first. Otherwise, somebody can have the best resume on the planet and very related experience. But in your organization, what you're actually asking them to do is very different. Same title, but your work is different depending on your growth goals, who they're surrounded with. And most people leave their boss. So that's the other piece of the puzzle that we have to make work.
Yeah. So we talk about it a lot, and in a lot of the groups that we run with, we talk about hiring for culture rather than skill. And that's exactly what you just described, because you can teach skill to most people that have the traits on that's going to fit into the culture. And I think a made-up percentage that I have, 99% of the people that we've hired solely for their skills are no longer with our organization because they didn't fit into the culture side of things.
That's why it's called Culture Index. And culture starts at the top. So we always have to look at who the leadership team is to know what the growth goals are and who can live inside that kind of an organization.
Okay, so let's dive into it's a very simple survey that you go through. It's 2 pages,
takes less than 10 minutes.
Unless you have to read all the definitions, and it takes a little longer, but nonetheless, it was very, very quick to go through. So you go through that process, and then you get all this information and you put it into a bunch of pretty colored dots. And what does that mean?
Yes. So the reason we provide this in largely graphical format is because most of our clients are built like you, which are not going to read big, long reports. So we have to make it simple. So for our clients, this
is a one-pager.
Yes.
This is all you need right there.
So for our clients, we put you through a 2-day workshop so you understand exactly what that means.
Okay.
So the 7 critical work-related traits, we don't measure intelligence, skills, or anything psychological or clinical.
Okay.
So we still have to do interviewing for those pieces of it, but at least you know you're starting with the right clay. And before that, in the hiring side, which is about 10 to 20% of the value of the program is on the hiring side, is we actually create a benchmark. Who are you looking for?
Okay.
Then you write the ad to attract that right person. So if I'm looking for somebody like you, do something like love a challenge. It's enough, never enough for you.
Yeah.
Hate being micromanaged. Love to juggle a million things at the same time. We want to talk to you.
Yeah. Yep.
You'll be like, yes, that's me. I don't know what the job is, but sounds great, right? You're going to roll and take that gamble.
Yeah.
Writing an ad for somebody else is very different. The rest of the value of the program is, what do I do with these people now that I have them?
Sure.
How do I onboard them, manage, motivate, communicate to make them successful?
Well, and it also helps with the I guess the coaching side of things, or one-on-one conversations. Everybody receives information differently. They need to be coached differently. And the more that you're aware of those types of things, because you can't apply that one philosophy to everybody, or you're going to struggle. You're going to fail.
Right. So we tend to treat people like we want to be treated. And we take the world of people, we break them down into 19 typified profiles, which means 5% of the time, you're right. 95% of the time, you're wrong.
Yeah.
Because they're not built like you.
Yep. And that is a struggle, I would say, especially in the small business world. That is a struggle if you're not aware of that out of the gate. And now that you say that, I'm going to back up probably, I'm going to go back about 8 or 9 years. And we struggled, and I used to tell people this all the time, that it was a capacity limitation, that we could only have about 10 or 11 people in our organization, and then people would fall off and we would hire. But we were constantly in a cycle of replacing rather than adding. And I felt like it was a management issue, but if I'm hearing what you're saying correctly, it could have just been the fact that we were applying the same type of management philosophy, or the same type of communication philosophy to everybody, regardless of how they saw the world. And so, therefore, we were shedding the people that didn't fit into that little bucket.
Right. Which, if we need people to fit in that bucket, that's fine. But if you're trying to balance out the team or get people to do things that you just don't want to do and, frankly, aren't good at, you need to hire people that are differently than you, but then you need to communicate with them differently than you.
So, a couple of transformational moments for me, and then we'll kind of dive into this, was years and years and years ago. I took a personality assessment, and it was very eye-opening. Said, oh, okay, this is why I struggle in these areas. This is why I deal with things this way. And then secondly, I started reading a book, and you may find this a little humorous. I started reading a book called Free the Idea Monkey. Have you ever heard of it?
I have heard of it. I have not read it, but I have heard of it.
Okay, so I started reading it, and I only made it about halfway through, and I got enough to know that what I needed to know out of the book. But it was.
That's because, Chad, you have the attention span of a gnat.
Mostly. So when I got through the part of it that was what I felt was applicable to me, and I don't know if the rest of the book is applicable because I never got there, but it was the fact of understanding that partnerships are are necessary and they offset each other. And in that book, the few that they really hit on is kind of Walt and Roy Disney, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, and I can't remember a couple other ones that they put in there, but those were at least two that stood out in my mind. And it talked about how you have to have the complementary, visionary, and integrator type roles. And once I understood that concept, it unlocked a whole different world for me because I completely understood the struggles that I was running into from a day-to-day basis and why I couldn't get anything done. So with that, let's dive into the deets.
So what I typically tell people is, if you're in a relationship with somebody, significant other, married, partner, it's often the opposites that attract you to that person. And then it's those very same opposites that make you crazy. What's wrong with them? Why don't they think the way that I do? Same thing at work. We just tend to give our loved ones a little more grace than we give our colleagues. And 99.9% of the world does not wake up in the morning and go, gee, I wonder whose life I can make difficult at work today.
Yeah.
It's not how we think, but we roll in. We're built differently. We step all on each other's toes. We wonder why that happens. This tells you not only why it happens, but now how do we solve the problem? That's the important piece. Having knowledge is great, but if you don't know what to do with it, it's just knowledge. Gotcha. So this is how do we now manage through that?
All right. Well, let's get into it. So what do we have?
So why don't we start with you and your business partner?
All right.
So that top chart, survey traits, that is who you are. If you have kids.
Am I supposed to show this? Is this something
that'd be great.
that people will care about? This is what I look like. It's all over the place.
So survey traits, that's who you are. That's the piece that's hardwired early on. Certainly by the time somebody's 12, more and more research is really looking like by about the time somebody's out of preschool.
Okay.
Some DNA, some environment, psychologists aren't really sure. But at the end of the day, that's how you're wired. Job behaviors, the second chart, that is who do I need to be successful in my role right now? So that piece will change based on projects, initiatives, etc. Right now during COVID, imagine everybody's got 5 extra computer programs running in their head. People are mentally tired, which is why you're getting the best and the worst of everybody. So job behaviors right now, I'm finding with my clients, do tend to be a little bit all over the place. So the way you want to think about it is you hire to the survey traits, you manage to the job behaviors. In some ways, the job behaviors is the leadership's report card of how you're doing communicating with those folks.
And ideally, you would want those charts to look very similar.
Yeah, in a perfect world, they're going to look very similar. We don't live in a perfect world, so there are going to be modifications.
So I've got to fix this A because I'm way off here.
So let's start with that. That red arrow represents the center of a bell curve.
All right.
So standard Six Sigma bell curve. So it's important for 2 reasons. One, it means 50% of the time you're talking to somebody, Chad, their dot's on the other side of the arrow than yours.
Gotcha.
Thus the miscommunication. And every 2 centiles is another standard deviation. So the further away from the arrow, the stronger that trait becomes. All the pluses get emphasized, as do the minuses. The further away from the arrow, that trait becomes.
Makes sense.
So do you want to step through them?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so the red dot, what we're measuring there is autonomy. So when the trait falls to the right of the arrow, we call it a high trait because it's higher than the statistical average. When it falls to the left-hand side of the arrow, we call it a low trait because it's lower than the average. This is not school where A's are good and F's are bad. High does not mean good, low does not mean bad. It's right or left of the arrow. So if we look at Chad's high A, 1, 2, 3 3/4 to the right, second standard deviation, so very independent, very visionary, forward-thinking, conceptual. Just give me the bottom line. Like to take risks, jump in, we'll figure it out as we go along. Your brain is sitting out there 5 years in advance. It's a very opportunistic trait, which is, hey, where are opportunities that we can take advantage of? Love that about the high A's. It's like sticking your foot on the gas in the car. This is a go and a grow trait. Those are all the pluses. What do you have to watch out for? Under communicating to other people. Because for high A's, your nail on a chalkboard moment is somebody telling you what to do or micromanaging you. Fastest way to get a high A off your bus. So that's the set of glasses that you wear in life or the way you perceive things. So, hey, team, here's flour and sugar. You have a vision in your head of what kind of cake you want. How much time are the low A's trying to figure out what kind of cake you want?
Yeah. Well, first of all, hopefully my wife is not listening to this. Secondly, it's interesting. And here more recently, just a few episodes back on the podcast, I outlined 5 lessons that I've learned in the last 5 months. And one of them was communicating and documenting a plan. So putting a plan in some type of a documented form so that other people can execute on it, because I find myself a lot of times in a situation where I'm frustrated because people aren't getting things done the way that I think they should, when I never gave them the kind of formula of the way that it should be done.
Shockingly, they can't read your mind. So one of the tips and tricks around that, Chad, is rather than saying, do you have any questions? It's, what did I leave out? Really, it's me, not you.
Yep.
Tell me what I missed. What'd you hear me say? That way you find out up front where you under-communicated the vision. So now they have an execution plan.
I'm just thinking through this process. You're really giving my wife way too much ammunition at the current moment. So
you should have her take the survey.
If she's not watching this, then we need to delete it. But anyways, all right. So that's A, autonomy.
Okay.
B,
so communicating to high A's, bullet points. Why is this important? What's in it for me? All right. The yellow dot, B trait, social ability. So on the high side, this is engaging, persuasive, get energy from people, give energy to people, do tend to think out loud. Now, you'll note that your A is higher than your B. So think of that, Chad, like selectively social. You turn up the charm when it helps you meet the goals. Because at the end of the day, what your brain is driven towards is bottom line achievement. So I'll turn up the charm when I need to, but not overly chatty.
Yeah.
So selectively social. Now, those on
I don't know that I want to agree with that or not, so I'm just going to be quiet.
We'll just ask the team. They'll say, yep, exactly.
This is starting to get awkward. All right. Sociability. I like it. So you're typically going to find this situation where a person is mostly reserved except when they need to be. So I'll say on a Myers-Briggs, I fall into a introvert category.
Right.
And when I tell people that, they laugh in my face.
Right. Because think of it more like an ambivert. So you will turn up the charm when necessary. But if I leave you by yourself all the time, you'll be drained too. That's why it's selectively social.
I like it. That is a very good explanation. I find myself that I need time to recharge, so downtime to recharge. But if it's too long, then I'm kind of go in the reverse. Right.
Then the brain starts to drain and says, I need some activity. I need to see some humans.
Very cool. Okay. Any other points on that?
So for the high B, think of that as like the glue in the organization, especially when it's the furthest trait to the right or the highest side, because they facilitate all the information that's lost in digital communication.
Okay.
No, what they meant by the email was X. So we need the high Bs inside the organization. What do you want to watch out for is when high Bs think out loud, other people go, oh, they made a commitment or they told me to do something. And you're like, it was just a hallway conversation. So here's Chad says,
oh, man.
Hey, team, you know what would be cool? Let's get iPads for all of our top customers, and we're going to load them with our app and all of that. Now, he's thinking out loud. The team just heard, because he's their boss, go buy a bunch of iPads. He gets a $5,000 bill. He's like, why do we buy all these iPads? They're like, because you told us to. You were just brainstorming. So for high Bs, check and verify action items, what you're committing to versus what we're brainstorming about.
Have you been like, do you have secret recording devices in this building? That happens.
I'm just reading dots. Wouldn't you like to be able to read these too?
It is very, very true. I've changed a lot of the communication whenever I have recognized that to certain people that I communicate with. I'll say, I'm not giving a directive here. I'm just thinking. I'm just processing this, because I have had many things come back and say, well, Chad said to do this. I'm like, I was drinking coffee one day and said something random, and I can see how it got connected, but that was not what I said.
Just a hallway conversation or sitting by the coffee pot.
Shoo. Okay. That's a good point. I would imagine there's a lot of small business owners that struggle with that as well.
Absolutely. And when you're a small to mid-sized business, it's really very critical you get the right people inside the organization and in the right seats, because you don't have the bandwidth to get it wrong. And when you get it wrong on somebody inside the organization, depending on what study you read, it's typically about 2.5 to 8 times their salary, depending on if it's internal or customer facing. So $50,000 job, salary is a minimum $150,000 error when you get it wrong.
Yep. Very interesting. All right. C.
Okay, C trait. We're going to have some fun with this one, Chad. So what we're measuring here is patience, or in your case, a lack of.
All right.
So that actually falls in the third standard deviation lower. 2% of the population, 98% of the people on the planet, Chad, are more patient than you. What they actually discovered in the field of applied behavioral psychology in World War II is that low C provides intensity, velocity to anything that's on the high side. So that provides a lot of intensity behind that need to achieve, never enough.
All right.
So think of this trait like focus and work style. So for low Cs, you like to juggle a lot at the same time. It's this internal sense of urgency. You work better under pressure, so you're going to create that for yourself by putting a whole bunch on your plate, procrastinating, artificial deadlines, whatever works for you, because it's a high when you get it in under the wire. Do tend to be fidgety in nature. That's why you're playing with your pen. Have a hard time sitting still. So for low Cs, that's why fidget spinners, standing desks, treadmill desks, all that was really built for low Cs because you actually think better when you're moving.
Very interesting. All right. I like this. Maybe not. I'm not sure. So it's very valid, right? Everything you just said is exactly on point. Heavily procrastinate until I have to. Artificial deadlines. So fun fact for you, and I've mentioned this on this podcast multiple times. This whole podcast, and the reason that it is now, we're going into a little over 2 years. Every Tuesday we release an episode. When we first started, I put in the infrastructure to record it live. So we did this all live on Facebook and YouTube every single week. For the only reason was I knew that if we didn't have some type of intense deadline like that, then it would be over with in a couple of weeks. And so that was my deadline, that I had to have everything ready to go, so that because we had to push the live button every Tuesday morning at 9.
That's how low Cs roll. High Cs is very confusing. They think you're all over the place, frenetic. Why can't you just sit down and get one thing done?
All right. Moving on.
All right. The D trait, what we're measuring there is conformity. So on the left-hand side of that arrow, or the low side, Chad, this is out-of-the-box thinking. Your brain isn't really constrained to the way that you've done things before. You love to play in the gray and the unknown. Rules are going to be more of a suggestion. You don't get stopped by hurdles that get thrown in your way. This is more of a short-term memory, which builds in a lot of resilience. Because if you have a bad day, you can pick yourself up, dust yourself off, go for it again.
All right. That's true.
Yes. So for low Ds.
For low Ds, they struggle with that.
All high Ds want to know how low Ds actually make it through life.
Yeah.
Because they're very confused. Because it's a jump in, we'll figure it out. We've never been swimming before. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. And they're like, no, we need to do research. We need to have all the information ahead of time. So that's where you're going to get a lot of stress inside of an organization. And you need that. High Ds just need to understand that conformity trait, rule following, knowledge equals power. Needs to understand why we need low Ds, because we need people pushing the envelope. We need people to push us where we've never been before. We could have the best product in the world, but if nobody can afford it, or in the sales world, outside sales hunters, we need that resilience built in because there's a lot of rejection in that role. So you need that resilience, but that's why your typical outside sales operations people end up knocking heads. Sits right in that trait.
That's going to be fun as we go through the next couple of reports here. Okay. That's very intriguing, and I'm sitting here looking at Chris, which we'll go back to that momentarily, and that's a struggle for us a lot of times on the conformity side, because he wants to have everything figured out before we even get started, and I'm like, why does it matter? We'll get it figured out through the process. Yeah,
we'll adjust as necessary, but let's get going. Action is better than inaction. Let's move.
And I'll say this, because I'm trying to think, practically speaking, for anybody that will be listening to this or watching this, that debate between those two perspectives, it can be debilitating because it is a stopping point.
Yes.
Okay. Someone that needs to have all of that information and someone that doesn't, if you can't get agreements on one way or another, then the idea it dies.
It dies. And not just the idea dies, but the opportunity dies. And that's what you don't want.
Yeah.
So it's understanding why we need both, what they bring to the organization. Yeah, we might want to put some guardrails around our low Ds, but we need them out there pushing the envelope, taking the risks, being resilient. We have to have that. Now, if I'm interviewing somebody like you, Chad, I'm going to ask you, tell me sometimes you sidestepped a policy. I'm listening for what you think is okay to sidestep.
Exactly.
I'm finding out how that trait is now baked, or how that clay is baked. So, I forged somebody's signature. Probably don't want that person in your organization. Versus, hey, lead time is 12 weeks. I knew if I moved these things around, we can meet the 11-week deadline. I took the order. I'm good with that guy. That guy's got a plan. So we start to interview based on the traits. So it's not just what you know, but how behaviorally you're going to show up so that you fit within our culture and our expectations for that role. Especially things like sales, customer service, customer success. Those can mean very different things inside different organizations.
Yes, very true. All right, I like this. All right, what do we have next?
Okay, so those top 4 traits are on the bell curve. These next 2 traits, the L and the I, on a scale of 0 to 10. So think of those top 4 traits as the car that you're buying. Now we're going to get into the amenities that come in the car.
All right.
All right, so the L and the I are on a scale of 0 to 10. So the L trait, we're measuring logic. So think of logic as something doesn't go as expected, what's going to be the reaction? 10 think with their heads, 0's wear their heart on their sleeve. So in the mid-range, at a 6, Chad, something doesn't go as expected. We might hear initial frustrated response. Once that emotion passes, the logic kicks in. So 10s can appear very Spock-like. 0s are going to express a lot of emotion.
All right.
It doesn't mean that 10s don't care. Mm-hmm. Think of it like an emergency room doctor. They can separate their emotion from the situation at hand.
So a 0 is more emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And the 10 is going to be just strictly logic.
Strictly logic. Go into my head, solve the problem.
So you would definitely want somebody that was in the mid-range.
Sure. Yes, Chad, that's the best.
Oh, this is fun. All right. No, that's very eye-opening. And I can't wait to see some of the reports of the rest of the team on that, because that is, that's where just dealing with people on a day-to-day basis is really good, because things happen. In business, right. Things happen.
It's never going to be perfect, right? Yep. So it's how do we go through that? So 0s, 1s, and 2s, they're going to express a lot more emotion when it happens. They do also read people really well.
So would they be the type of people that everything is always great or everything is always horrible?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
I'm going to just pretty much figure out who those are based off of that. All right. Next one is I.
Okay, so the I is ingenuity. So ingenuity is inventiveness, originality of thinking, abstract thinking.
All right.
Think of 10, Walt Disney, Elon Musk, Picasso, Newton. 0, very literal, linear thinker. Pay attention to what's real, what's in front of them. Mm-hmm. At a 9, Chad, in your brain, it's like popcorn. Mm-hmm. Here's an idea, here's an idea, here's an idea, here's an idea. Now, 7 out of 10 of them are going to be insane. We cannot do that. But in there are going to be some real gems. So 7 and above on this scale is high. We always encourage you guys to get a nice journal, back of the napkin, jot down all the ideas, because there's so many running through your head. We can't do them all, but the idea you come up with today, combined with the idea 5 months ago, that is an absolute game changer. So you can imagine when COVID hit, I called my clients and said, get all of your high A's, autonomy, future visionary thinkers, and all of your high ingenuity people together and figure out how you're going to manage through that. Because those 2 traits are coming up with things nobody has ever thought of before. Anytime there's a market upset, somebody's going to win. You want it to be you.
So one of the things with that is being very disciplined, because you just said, get that notebook, get that, however you're going to jot down notes. And I can say from my perspective, yes, I have Evernote, I have Google Keep, I have Google Docs, I've got random notes on here, I've got this notebook, that notebook, and a bunch of other stuff. And then actually trying to curate all that information or go back and find it is a nightmare. So being disciplined in that is I think something that I still struggle with it. I'm not perfect at it with any stretch, but it is something that I think if you have those types of people, figure out a way that they have a place that they can keep track of it.
And it could be just every once in a while having a brainstorming session and somebody else takes notes. Because your low conformity trait, the green dot on the left-hand side, that's why it's here and there and everywhere. Again, playing to your strengths, have somebody else be the cataloger of the ideas. So you just flip ideas to them and they keep it in some sort of an organized format.
It's interesting. That's some really valuable advice for anybody that lives in this world, where even if you've never taken this test or this index report.
By the way, we call it a survey because you can't fail on who you are.
I'm going to write down this survey. All right, so I don't mess that up several more times. But the fact that if you see yourself as struggling with that, figure out what works, what can be consistent. I know for me, I will typically bring somebody alongside and say, hey, here's an idea, put it in a document so that it's off of my brain and it's off of my plate. I can come back and work with it, but it's somebody else is kind of taking the ball and running with it.
Exactly. So imagine your brain has so much capacity to manage things.
Yeah.
when you're operating outside of your wheelhouse, that's what drains your mental stamina. So what you're doing is exactly right. Figure out what your gifts are, delegate the rest.
Gotcha.
That's called really utilizing the team.
Okay. So here's what I would like to do. That covers all of these. And then we haven't even talked about the job behaviors yet.
There's one more trait in there.
Oh, okay. What is it?
On that left-hand side, you see EU.
Yes.
So technically, we call this energy units. So Dr. Jana and Gary Wallstrom, who created this, Dr. Jana, chairman of psychology at Old Dominion, this can be a bit confusing for people because energy sounds like somebody has a lot of energy or they don't. So people want to go high is good, low is bad. It's not that. This is really mental stamina.
Okay.
Mental stamina is simply how many batteries do I have in my brain to sustain my work, but especially when I have to act out of character.
Okay.
When you're acting out of character, that's what drains your brain.
Okay.
So the brain is self-protecting. It's going to take a break when it needs it. So think back when you're in finals week in school and you're having to reread something 6 times because your brain's tired, it's taking a break. You might as well take a break too. You'll get a better return on investment when you do that and go back at work. So get a cup of coffee, walk around the office, whatever works for you.
So what does that measure? That's on a 0 to what?
Typical scale is 8 to 85.
8 to
and it's
85,
simply
okay.
how many batteries do I have in my brain to sustain my work, but especially when I have to act out of character.
Okay.
That's what drains your brain. So for you, trying to make you an accountant, a cost accountant, where you're in a room all by yourself all day doing spreadsheets.
Yeah.
How fast is your brain going to get tired?
Yeah, real fast.
But if you're out there doing the strategic, opportunistic thinking, leading, managing, directing, that actually energizes you.
Yeah.
It's when you act out of character that it drains you.
Interesting. Okay. So do we need to jump into job behaviors?
Yep. So let's go through job behaviors. So survey traits, who you are, hardwired early on. Job behaviors is situational. So figure that's good for about 3 to 6 months. And if we look at the difference between your survey traits and your job behaviors, the A and the B are on the right-hand side and the C and the D are on the left-hand side, or high and low. But your A and your B switch. Your social ability comes much higher than your autonomy. So that autonomy is go and grow. It's never satisfied no matter what you achieve. Anytime you see that a high autonomy reining back, you are not running as fast as you want to run. So that typically indicates a market problem, a people problem, or a process problem, because something is there that you are having to be more of a cheerleader than a strategist. And where your real gift is outlooking 3, 5, 7 years ahead, finding opportunities that other people literally just don't see, and then coming up with kind of a wireframe of how we're going to capitalize on it, but let other people go execute it.
Intriguing. Very intriguing. I don't even know how to respond to that. That is super, well, from my perspective, it's super dead on. That it's frustrating whenever you have to step back and get everybody back on the same page. You have to step back and say, okay, why have we lost vision? Why have we lost scope? Whatever it is, get the group back together, get the band back together so that we can progress further.
Right. So with all the love in the world, Chad, we also have to take responsibility when sometimes it's us. And it is continuing to send the message. So people really need to hear something 7 to 8 times for it to sink in their brain. So your job just became the CRO, Chief Reminding Officer. It's always constantly reminding. And even though you have all those amazing ideas, try to be consistent on the big ones we want people to continue to execute. Otherwise, they will feel like they have whiplash and they don't know what they're supposed to be chasing right now.
Agreed. Yeah. Oh, so I'm going to think back. It was around the end of last year. We had a little meeting session, and we were talking about the fact that we were moving at such a rapid pace that we were throwing so many new things out there every week that it was impossible for everybody to be connected. And so I think I was in the middle of a book. It was one of, I don't remember which one, but it was about cascading communication. And so we were struggling with cascading communication because it was coming at such a rapid pace that it wasn't even cascading at all, because it was just, I don't even know a good analogy for it. It was just a mess.
But look at your traits, and now we know why. Your high autonomy, visionary thinking, combined with your low C intensity right now, and so many ideas running through your head, you have to understand that how many people are really built like you on the planet? Not a lot. So we have to put the wireframe in for them to be able to execute. Otherwise, they're going to feel like they failed. And really, the failure is communication up front. Now you throw COVID into it where we send everybody home.
Sure.
What we lost is there's so much information transferred at the coffee pot, in the hallway, in the lunch break area.
Mm-hmm.
We lost that when we sent people home. That means we have to be much more intentional about the direction that we're giving, especially to the team where the A is on the low side, the humble, supportive team player, task-oriented. They're looking for direction. And if we don't give that to them, we put a tremendous amount of stress on them trying to guess what's in our head. And then when they get it wrong, they feel like they failed. Well, we didn't actually communicate what we wanted.
Very good. Okay. So all of this, so this is a lot of information, and I'm just trying to process this from someone that's listening or watching this going, okay, that's really cool. We just dove into everything about Chad. And so now he's just...
So why does this matter to me?
Yeah. Why does this matter to me? So when it comes down to it, because I think the way that this is progressing, I think we should kind of dive into Chris's information here so that we can kind of show a compare and contrast. And then we can kind of break this into a two-part where we can then talk about the team and how it's built and how those complement each other to kind of have something that works together as an organization rather than just focusing on one or two. Does that work?
Exactly. Because what makes a high-performing team is trust. Well, who do you trust? People that you know. This gets you a huge way of understanding why somebody's doing what they're doing rather than our assumptions.
Sure.
Because if I assume you're doing something for a certain way and you're assuming why I'm doing it, we're operating on all assumptions. We are never going to get anywhere. What creates the high-performing team is the trust and clarity of expectations. And the dynamics, which is what this gets into. And for the people that are listening to this, because I was in here, so thanks so much for having me. You can kick the tires on our dime. Just contact me. I'll set you up with logins. You can survey your team. We can have a non-solicitous conversation.
Sure.
You'll walk away with some great information about your organization because a high-performing team with a lesser product will always win over the best product in the world and a team that is not cohesive.
Yeah. There's so many applications that you can give to that and so many examples that you can give to that. I'm very intrigued by all this and some of the things that you just said or interesting triggers. So some of our core values, we have 8 core values that we go out over with our organization. Number 1 is defined expectations. Number 2 is consistent communication. Number 3 is cultivating trust. And those we repeat those very, very consistently. Then we break it down into some other categories. But everything that you just said plays into the reason that those core values are in place.
And what this does is gives you a roadmap of how to make that happen. Otherwise, we're just throwing darts at a dartboard. Hope we get it right.
Sure.
Why not use data to solve the issue and get it right the first time rather than trial and error, which we're falling down and costs us time and money and skinned knees and bruised elbows.
Yep. All right. So now that we've figured out how amazing of an individual I am, joking aside, let's talk about how complicated Chris is. So we've got his information here side by side, and it's interesting. I'm going to pull this up. Mine's got a bunch of scattered notes all over it, so it may be hard to see. But if you look at them, they're very, very opposite.
Yep, they're very opposite. One thing is in common: you are both deductive, analytical thinkers. So you like to make decisions with facts, data, and information. That is similar. Everything else is very different. So Chris, as a low A, again, high is not good, low is not bad. It's right or left of the arrow. You'll notice that red arrow moves. It moves in relationship to that EU, energy unit, mental stamina number.
Gotcha.
The higher the EU, the more the red arrow slides to the right. The lower, the more it slides to the left. So a 10 is not a 10 and a 0 is not a 0. It's right or left, high or low, and how far away.
All right.
So if we look at Chris and think of the trait that's on the high side, especially the highest, when you meet somebody, that's a trait that you're going to be met with. So if you look at his conformity trait, D trait, this is very thorough, accurate, detailed. Knowledge equals power. I'm somebody that loves to be that subject matter expert. This is like sticking your foot on the brake in the car. This is more of a risk-averse or cautious decision maker. I need the information up front before I feel comfortable jumping in. And I like the rules, and I like everybody to follow the rules, Chad. So it really bugs me when people break the rules, Chad. So that is what's going to get on Chris's nerves. So it's understanding why we need both. And
a lot of long conversations about what the rules are and why they're important and why have we changed the rules. Correct.
So for Chris, that conscientious nature doesn't want anything to go wrong that has his name on it. That's what he's trying to alleviate is the risk of something going wrong that has my name on it. That's why I'm in pursuit of the how we're going to do it. So your visionary trait says, hey, here's where we're going. Now we're going to fill in how we're actually going to get there. That makes a beautiful team. But because you're virtually built opposite, we're going to have miscommunications and frustrations. Now we know why. Now we can put processes in place to manage through that.
Years ago, we were both on the stage at a conference, and they were asking us a lot of questions, and we were kind of joking about the fact that I'm the gas pedal and he's the brake pedal. And what you just described is very true. The problem that you have in some organizations like that is when both are being pressed at the same time, all you do is spin around in circles.
Exactly. So that's where we need to come up with, all right, how much information does Chris really need to feel comfortable versus how much do you want to move forward? We have to have some realistic, honest, vulnerable conversations about that. So now we know. And now we can use the traits to talk about it, which might be, hey, Chad, I need you to pull your high A back, and if I'm Chris, and give me more details. That you have the picture in your head, you know pretty much how you're going to get there. It's just actually verbalizing it to alleviate his worry mode.
And I think over time you start to figure those things out. Like, what are the trigger points? What are the things that you need to address early on? And the other stuff you just ignore.
Right. Exactly. But imagine onboarding somebody built like that. I'm going to onboard them completely differently than I would onboard you. I'm going to manage you completely differently than I would manage Chris. For you, I'm just going to say, Chad, I don't think you can do it. You're like, what? Gauntlet down. Let's go.
Sure.
Love a challenge. For Chris, even before he starts, imagine he's got a big bucket in front of him that's got a green D on it. I got to put him as much knowledge into that bucket as fast as I can. It's like he's got Pac-Man for a brain, just chews up information. Again, what am I alleviating? The fear of something going wrong that has my name on it. Same thing with your customers. When you can figure out what your customers' traits are and speak to those traits instead of just being you,
so
that's where magic happens.
You just said, if you said to me, I don't think you could do it, then that's gauntlet down, ready to prove you wrong, which I can give you examples of that. But if you were to say that same type of thing to somebody that would fall into that category like Chris, how would he respond to that?
It's very confronting. It just doesn't work. You're not pushing the right buttons.
It doesn't
even
even
motivates that person. No, in fact, it feels reckless and careless to him.
Interesting. Okay.
Now, the C trait, patience piece, he's on the high side. So he is patient, methodical, process-driven. You actually probably hear him use the word process a lot. We need a process around that. What's the process for this? That high C, imagine the patience trait is like, again, focus and work style. So I'm single focused and I go down a checklist and I've got a pressure cooker for a brain. I need time to think and to process. So we don't want to push Chris before he's ready to make a decision. We got to give him some time to think things through, which is hard for your low C that's like, I need the answer and I need it now. Right? If you push him before he's ready to make a decision, the answer will be no. Why do that to yourself? His brain needs time to process. Time is a very big thing for high Cs.
Intriguing.
Now, his low B, social ability, this is skeptical. I need facts and data. I like to test.
What did you say, skeptical?
Skeptical with the low B. And I do find low Bs tend to be very sarcastic. They're super funny if you know they're kidding, but if you don't know they're kidding, you can easily take something wrong. So for that low social ability, the yellow dot on the left, I need facts and data. I don't trust stories. I need to measure and inspect it myself. So think like a surgeon being a low B. What are they known for being bad at? Bedside manner. Why? Because they tell information. So it's not that they don't talk, they tell information. And I always tease the low Bs like Chris that he's got 5 friends that he's had since kindergarten. So when he shows up to work, he's there to work, not to make friends. And so it really bugs him when people are chit-chatting in the hallway. And he only has 2,000 words a day to use, so don't make me use them all up on you.
Oh, that's hilarious. Absolutely hilarious.
So he thinks and then speaks, which is why he's going to interpret somebody that's verbally processing the high B, thinking as they're speaking. He's going to easily interpret that as a commitment.
Yeah. So it's hilarious. I'm trying to think how much of information I want to share, but we've had many conversations that it's like, all right, I'm done. I can't because I can go on forever. I can. That is almost entertainment, right? Is to have a conversation and debate back and forth over something, regardless of
and
what the outcome is.
Yeah. You love ideating.
And he's basically just said, I can't talk about this anymore. I don't have any more words about this. It's got to pause. It's hilarious.
He used his 2,000 words.
I used them all up. I feel sorry for his family the rest of the day because he just goes home and sits in silence. No, that's intriguing. Okay, so we've got a low A, a low B on the scale, and then we're just over on the C and the D as well. Mm-hmm. We get down to logic and ingenuity.
All right. So logic, Chris is very logical. You combine that with the low social ability, really thinks before he speaks, and he can appear very stoic or very Spock-like. So humans are meaning-making machines. We make meaning out of behavior all the time. You get a text that says, we need to talk. Typically, we go to the negative, not the positive. Typically, we're thinking something's wrong rather than, yay, somebody has something exciting to tell me. So Chris can appear very Spock-like. So he does have to work harder at smiling and connecting with the humans so they don't make stuff up about him that's not true.
Smiling with the humans. That's hilarious. All right.
And then the ingenuity of 1. So more literal, pays attention to what's real, what's in front of him. So if I show him, like this notebook and say, hey, can you bring me one of these? He's going to look for exactly this.
Yes.
I might get, a laptop or an iPad for you. It's still something that you can take notes on. So if you look at your ingenuity of 9 and Chris's ingenuity of 1, here's what you want to watch out for, Chad. When people give you a blank stare or pause or go, they have no idea what your Disney-esque high ingenuity is talking about because it's very abstract. So it's not that Chris doesn't have ideas. It's that his ideas are going to be more practical in nature. But he is more literal, more linear, pays attention to what's real, what's in front of him. So I would imagine there's been some times where you're talking very abstract and he's like, just plain speak. Just what are you trying to say? Stop beating around the bush. And you're trying to convey an idea that's very abstract. He's more literal.
Never had that problem ever, period.
Right.
All right. So we've got that. Now we look back into the job behaviors.
So in job behaviors right now, and this could be some COVID related because he is your business partner, he's pulling his social ability up, as are you. Why? Because we're dealing with people that are going through a whole lot right now. So he's saying, okay, I'm going to pull my social ability up. I'm going to be quite relationship oriented. I'm still going to be laid back and methodical. I do drop my conformity trait to the low side. So I'm working on being more flexible. So I'm trying to be this approachable, good listener, cheerleader inside the organization right now, which is hard for him to do because he would really prefer to be your analytical guy in the back.
Very true.
And his mental stamina goes up quite a bit. So the mental stamina number, the raw number, really isn't as important as the delta between the survey traits and the job behaviors. Think of this as utilization. So imagine Chris has enough gallons in his car to drive 8 miles. Right now he's driving, 18? So right now he's having to drive 18 every day.
Gotcha.
So imagine what he's going home like. Exhausted because he's overutilized. Now, if we have a big project, there's light at the end of the tunnel, we can all kind of power up for a while. But if this goes on consistently, we are going to burn Chris out.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm seeing the correlation here. So the energy units up here on the survey is an 8, and for the job, it's taking 18. So that means that he's overused for a period of time.
Correct.
And over here on mine, 47 on the survey traits and 36 on the job behavior. So I've got room to take on more.
Correct. You've got more mental stamina. But why is that happening? Because you're having to rein that high A back.
Sure.
You're having to slow down. That's why your energy units is dropping. His is going up more than double of what he has.
Oh, yeah.
So that we really want to take an eye on and be aware of, because you do that for too long and he's going to get sick.
Interesting. Very informative. Okay. I like this. This is very, very, very beneficial. If you are running a business and if you have a business partner or if you have people that are very close to you in your organization, this is eye-opening. And I can tell you just with the things that we've done in the past, learning more about each other has helped us to see each other's perspectives a lot easier and has cut down on some of those frustrations. Not that they don't still exist, but
Sure.
they still, when it does happen, you're at least more aware of why it got to that point.
Why? And now the more important piece is what do we do about it to manage through it and make it better the next time? Now, right now for organizations, this is the best time that we've had in 10 years to hire talent or to upgrade talent. Because before, it was hard to lure people away. So even if people are working, everybody sat home during lockdown and went, do I really like what I'm doing? Do I like where I am? But you have to do it with an ad, which is an advertisement, not a job description.
Yeah.
Job descriptions do not excite anybody, and that's what most of the things are out there are just job descriptions.
Yeah.
You have to write an ad to attract those people that you're looking for in your seats.
All right. I want to take a quick break and come back for kind of part 2 because we've got a lot of information here. And the part 2 is going to be, we're going to dive into some surveys from our leadership team and how they play together and why it's important that they have different traits for the roles that they're in. Okay. So
Sounds great.
We'll do that in part 2. All right, Eileen, thank you very much for this is just part 1. We're getting ready to dive into part 2 for next week. I'm blown away. Very, very accurate information. And it's one of these things that as you get more of this type of information, you can make better decisions inside of your organization. So make sure you check this out. Links are going to be listed below wherever you're listening or watching this at. Make sure you drop in the description how you found out about Culture Index. Put in Eileen Stephens' name, or you can reference Chad Lingafelt or the Coffee Break Podcast, and it'll make sure it gets to the right people and gets over to Eileen. Just a wealth of information. If this is your first time watching or listening to the podcast, we've got over 100 other episodes for you to check out. All you have to do is go to Loc-Doc.net/podcast. That's the place to go for all of the information. You can subscribe there. Plus, you can find all the video format of this on YouTube and Facebook. Just search for LOC, DOC, and podcast. And those results will come up right in the search bar for you. So check that out. Thank you for watching today. Thank you, Eileen, for sticking around because part 2 is coming next week. So get ready for it.